I want to say something very briefly about the vital importance of being careful what you allow into your consciousness. It is called conscious consumption or conscious input, but the original yogic term for it was ahara. Ahara is not aharam, or ahara is not only the food you eat. Whatever you allow into your consciousness will nourish you or cause imbalance in you. Anything that you consume is ahara. Anything that you allow into your consciousness, allow into your mind, your body, your emotions, in that sense is ahara. So even intimate relations, even sexual relations become ahara. Because it is another vibration that you have allowed into your. So what you read, what you see, what you listen to, all these things become very important, since the whole point of yoga is yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is the cessation of the modifications of the chitta. If you are not careful, if you don't do your foundation strongly in what kind of conscious input, what kinds of ahara goes into you, chitta vritti will never stop. Chitta vritti will never ever happen, because you are coming with hundreds of lifetimes of input, hundreds of lifetimes of vasana samskara, basic habit patterns, basic ways of responding. And if you continually take in new and more, which is why as you grow in yoga, you find it very difficult to watch stupid TV serials, you find it very difficult to watch ultra-violent movies, things. You begin to understand this is not helpful for consciousness, this is not helpful for growth, this is not helpful, and you begin to get quite disgusted. What nonsense is this? Childish. That is the very obvious level of. But the real danger in all this, is when you come to these places or sites, or you come to these kind of processes which seem spiritual, or they have all the spiritual jargon and they have all the spiritual vocabulary in place, and that kind of ahara is extremely dangerous. Because I am not one of those comforting yogis who say, oh, it is all right, it doesn't matter, so long as your intentions are good. That's not true at all. You can get sidetracked, you can get lost, you can wander for lifetimes. I know, because it happened to me also. So as a person who knows how many lifetimes I lost because I went into foolish things, basically occult and black magic and ego trips. To be careful about what you allow into your consciousness is a vital foundational step. If you are not willing to take that step, you can do anything. You can do 5 hours of pranayama, you can do 3 hours of hatha yoga, and still nothing will happen. Because if you do not start filtering, if you do not start blocking, you are just creating more and more boulders in your path. You have to be conscious, what am I letting in? Because anything that you let in, until you come to that state of yogic vibration where the chitta, the mind stuff is completely calm, completely still, where thoughts have ceased and therefore the mind has ceased, anything you take in will have to be processed and dealt with. Anything that touches your chitta has a karmic imprint, and you will have to suffer the consequence of that karmic imprint. Might not be a bad consequence, it might be a very good consequence, but it is a consequence, it is karma, and as long as karma is operating, you cannot be enlightened, you cannot be liberated. You can be enlightened also, but you cannot be liberated, you won't be free. So this unfortunately is not stressed, and what happens is there's a lot of nonsense going on. The nonsense has a sort of generic word for it. It is called New Age spirituality. and, and these places, these sites, these processes, these groups which claim to have special knowledge about other dimensions, and now a lot of people are getting born for the first time on our earthly plane to speed up the consciousness of the planet. There are crystalline children, there are diamond bodies, there are reptilian overlords. All these sort of things are complete waste of time. The reptilian overlords is when some ass with some sadhana gets a glimpse of the Nagaloka and totally freaks out and loses their mind, because the Nagas are pretty scary. They are not, by and large, they are quite friendly to human beings. They don't help, but when you see them, they are pretty scary. So you start projecting all your fears onto that, and you think there is one whole secret conspiracy of Nagas ruling the world, and there are people who can change their shape and reveal themselves. All these foolish notions, and unfortunately, these things are all mixed up. These things are all mixed up with authentic practices. These things are all mixed up with authentic yogic traditions. So you will have one or two good meditations and about 200 pieces of nonsense. You will have one or two good pranayama or kriyas taught over there, and then you have to purchase this entire bullshit. And they have these hierarchies of enlightenment, and this person is at this level, and now our teacher is at the 35th level, and all these things you have to run. Well, yes, certainly there is a huge mystical component to yoga. There is no nonsense in yoga. And that is why the parampara is so important. That is why the teacher who is experienced in these matters is so important. Most of the time, nobody dares to ask a person running a workshop, what is your parampara? What is your lineage? What is your credibility? What have you written? What have you done? Who taught you? How do we know? So this is creating a lot of damage, you see, because it's not even that there are some evil energies behind it. That is quite rare. It is quite rare for an Asura Prakriti vibration to be controlling these things. Most of the time it is not evil, it is just malice. There are what are called energy beings. They just like playing the fool. They just like disappointing you and obstructing you and sending you off course. So they are usually the ones behind all these sort of processes. And they are amused by your derailment. You are now going off track, you are wandering here and there, you're doing a lot of stuff which is completely besides the point, it is not helping you. That excess psychic energy which builds up, they can feed on it. That is one reason. But more than the reason that they can feed in it, it is their nature, it is their svabhava. They like it. They like to see you make an ass of yourself. They like to see you wander. They get amusement from that. Now, these things people don't know. A lot of these millennial cults where they are told, that in the next few years there is going to be a vital transformation, and then the aliens will come in the spaceships, or we will all evaporate from within our clothes and suddenly go to another dimension. Or the worst thing is when they say that your children are special. Your children are crystal children, your children are ruby children, all these, that your children are now, their DNA has changed. These are all really cruel things that you tell people. And the minute I hear that, I know these are those malicious entities, and they are just laughing. They're just having this fun at your expense. Because the energy dimensions are pretty tough dimensions. They did not ask you to engage with them. So if you engage with them, you should have the protections in place. Now, unfortunately, today the protections are not in place. Somebody sent me a video. It's actually posted on YouTube. This is a tantric ritual we were taught. And I said, so who is this person who taught you? What is his lineage? Some Gora who had done something at the Osho ashram and self-appointed master. You know, almost everything in that ritual was wrong. One or two good things. Basic level protection that you have to do before you start that ritual, that person doesn't have a clue. Now, is he an evil person? I don't think so. I think he is quite sincere. And he really wants people to grow and everything. But you see, you, because of your ignorance, because of your half-baked or less than half-baked knowledge, you are now sending people into places, because they'll do the ritual and they'll open themselves up, and they'll open themselves up in wrong ways, and the influx of negativity is always easier than the influx of positivity. You'll just open that person up to be possessed partially or fully by some kind of bad vibration, lower level entity vibration. And a lot of these what are called millennial things are these lower level entities. And people don't get it. People simply don't get it. So I always say that one of the rules is, if you ever end up with a group of people where everybody is a reincarnation of somebody famous, run. Because that is chabi. That is flattery. Genuine spiritual guidance is very hard and tough. It never flatters you. It never tells you you are special. It never tells you you are unique in the world. It always tells you, we know, here is work for you. This is what you need to do. It is always asking more. It is always giving responsibility. It is always challenging. Never ever. It will never ever flatter you. So the minute you hear these messages that, the universe has been waiting for you to be born, which is what we all carry deep within ourselves somewhere, that one day people will open their eyes and see my specialness, I am the most unique snowflake. Every snowflake is unique, but I am the uniquest. So I get very upset, I get very saddened by it, because it won't affect me. If somebody sends me a link to one such stupid site, as happens at least 4 times a week, I'll just block it off. It does impact my chitta also. But the people who are engaging with that, the people who are practicing those kind of processes, the people who actually believe all this seriously, how much chitta vritti has happened? And when are they going to clean it up? As it is, there is this whole backlog from lifetimes. You have come to yoga, and now instead of doing something seriously, you are manufacturing new nonsense to clean up. This is unbelievable. This is just unbelievable, and of course it's the way the universe keeps its balance. If everybody sincerely started doing yoga, then what will happen to the world? Swami Vivekananda used to say, of the people who come to spirituality, 85% fail. They find it too difficult, they don't have the discipline, they don't have the intelligence, they can't do it, they leave it. Out of the 15% that are left, 5% go mad. Yeah, because the influx of Shakti from the processes and the practices is too much, and their body and their mind shatters from that. 5% of people get stuck. They are neither here nor there. Some awakening happens, some movement happens, but then they find it difficult to push forward. And 5% of people generally make some actual progress from life to life. That's not a very helpful diagnosis. Those are not helpful numbers. But now I know the reason why. No sooner does little Shakti move in you, then suddenly you are convinced, I am Jagadamba, mother of the universe, or I am Vishnu or I am Shiva. And then there are organizations and there are websites which will. How can this be? How can this have a good ending in any way? We have to be careful. Now, our approach is the integral yoga approach. All life is yoga. So we are not saying stop reading, stop viewing. Though many they do. One of the requirements is you can't watch TV, you can't watch movies, and that is the reason why is chittavritti. Because of chittavritti, don't put additional inputs. So actually, they are not wrong. There are other ways. Our ways are easier. The 8 spiritual breaths and the affirmations are a way of dealing with that. And anyways, one should always be aware of what is going on. The filter should become natural for you. It should not be external. It should not be that you are locked in a cage, therefore there is no temptation. Therefore there is no. This appalls me. This appalls me because the fault is not in any spiritual process. You see, the spiritual process in itself is not important. Whatever meditation you are doing, whatever kriya you are doing, in itself and by itself, it is not that important. What is important is that you are doing it. Because if you do it, you automatically create the channel for the Shakti to flow, and the Shakti entering you is what actually transforms you. Your efforts are only 5% in real terms. Now at that time, if you go wandering into, I've actually seen the sort of belief systems that these people propagate, and the sort of is your life so pathetic that a fantasy is much better than actually sitting and doing the hard work? Because this is pathetic. This is actually pathetic. Now one day I'll talk about all these vital beings. I'll talk what is a Danava, what is a Daitya, what is a Rakshasa, what is an Asura, what is a Naga, Gandharva. ये सब क्या होता है? They are all yogis have spent many years in figuring out all these things, and there are sensible ways to understand and deal with all these things. Not this kind of foolishness. Because if it is a malicious being, that is one thing, because that only derails you and sends you away, and one day you will run up against somebody like me and the person will say stop all this bullshit and you can come back on track. But if it is an evil being, then there is a lot of trouble. If it is an asura prakriti, if it is something that comes from the demonic nature, then there is trouble. Because that will give you powers, that will give you abilities, and then you are lost. So the responsibility has to be there always. The responsibility has to be there always. Is this thing going to help in chittavritti nirodha, or is this thing going to just add to the chittavritti? Conscious consumption. Is this nourishing ahara, or is it deteriorating ahara? Is it something that will deteriorate me, or is it something that will nourish me? That has to be. One has to be very, very clear about that all the time, because otherwise, it's the number one reason why people don't get anywhere even after years and years and years of sadhana. They're doing the kriya properly, they're doing the asanas properly, they're doing the meditation and the mantra, and that is the other problem. They're doing too many things at one time. And still nothing happens. Why? Because chittavritti is continual. Because all the time, one of the things they always tell you, or they used to insist on in yoga, is if you are doing a process, all other processes have to stop. But today is the day of the khichdi and the rice plate and the avial. Everything people want to mix up. And we seem to think it is some kind of prejudice to stop other processes. That we need to have equanimity towards everything, but it doesn't work that way. There are 1,80,000 ways to liberation. Only Shiva knows all of them. You can walk on only one at a time. Trying to simultaneously walk on 3 different paths doesn't work. So if you're doing one process, you stick to that process and see it through. You cannot do 2 hours of mantra japa, then suddenly switch to meditation, then suddenly switch to, then doing puja, then doing. Stick to one thing. Let the channel deepen within you so that the Shakti can start flowing unobstructed. This way you are trying to create 4-5 channels which are crisscrossing each other, and not only that, it's not even the genuine Shakti, it's like the Shakti from all this negative vibration. So it's an ongoing spiritual problem, and at least people in yoga should be careful about it. Do not get into these fantasy modes. Do not get into these. Conscious input is the vital foundation stone. Otherwise, Chittavritti Nirodha is not going to happen. Unless we are very conscious and very clear what we are allowing into our Chitta, it will never happen. Never ever, because you are just creating one more loop, one more endless loop. Sarva